The following episode contains language. Specifically, it contains a breakdown of language, the kind used to recruit, retain, and reshape the people inside high control groups. None of the phrases discussed are being endorsed, but if you find yourself nodding along because the language sounds so familiar, guess what? That's the point. And that's always been the point. There is a word NXIVM used to call people who hadn't joined yet. They called them prospects. Not strangers, not outsiders, not potential members. Prospects. Like a mining operation. Like there was something valuable inside each person that they just hadn't extracted yet, and it needed to be extracted correctly. The people who had joined were called enrolled. Not members, not followers, not believers, enrolled. Like a course, like a university, like a completely reasonable thing a reasonable person would do. And when someone left, when they walked away from the courses and the sash and the branding ceremonies and the sleep deprivation and all of those things, they weren't called leavers. They weren't called apostates or defectors. They were called suppressives. A word that meant this person is not just gone. That word meant that person is dangerous. The person is actively working against your growth, against your mission, against your higher self. This person, who is now a suppressive, who used to be your friend, is now a threat. One word, and suddenly the person you loved is someone you have to protect yourself from. And that's what language can do. And the thing I need you to understand, the thing this entire episode about, is that you and I already speak this language. Not the NXIVM version, but a version of it. And you learned it a very long time ago. And you learned it in places that felt completely normal. So let me take you through the architecture of cult language. Not as a warning about cults, but as a mirror for everything else. Every high control group develops what researchers call loaded language. It's a specialized vocabulary that does several things simultaneously. It creates the in-group identity. So if you know the words, you belong. And if you don't, you just don't. It also shortcuts critical thinking. Loaded language replaces analysis with reflex. So you don't have to think through a complex situation. You especially don't have to think it through if you have a word that categorizes it instantly. And it also makes leaving the group harder. When the language of the group becomes the language that you think in, leaving the group means losing the words you use to understand yourself. Robert Lifton, the psychiatrist who first documented the psychology of thought reform, he called this the sacred science combined with loading the language. And the group's terminology becomes the only legitimate way to describe reality. Any outside vocabulary is, at best, insufficient, and at worst, evidence of corruption. So here's what makes this interesting for my purposes, our purposes, if you will. Loaded language is not a cult invention. It's a very, very human one. And pop culture has been building it in you since before you could read. So let me walk you through some of the words. Word 1 is family. Cults call themselves families. NXIVM called itself a family. The Manson group called itself a family. Literally, the family. Every high control group with a residential component eventually uses the word because it does something very specific. It reframes the relationship between the leader and the members as something prior to their choice to join. You don't choose your family. You belong to your family. Your loyalty to your family is not contingent on whether or not the family deserves it. And leaving your family is not just a practical decision. It's a moral failure. It's abandonment, and it's betrayal. So now I want you to think about every sports team that calls itself a family, every workplace that you've ever worked for that called itself a family, every brand that tells you that its customers are a family, every political movement, every online community, every church, every MLM. They all use the word family to describe a group that you involuntarily joined but could voluntarily leave. The word isn't correct. It never was. It's a reclassification from community, which does have conditions, to family, which allegedly doesn't. Once you're family, leaving isn't just leaving. It's something you have to be forgiven for. That brings me to word number 2, which is growth. And that is a word that cults love, growth. So let me tell you why. Growth implies its opposite. If you are growing, you were previously smaller, insufficient, and not enough. And the growth is always in a specific direction, towards the group's values, the group's worldview, the group's version of what a fully realized person looks like. Resistance to the group's teaching is not a disagreement. It's a resistance to growth. And a resistance to growth is a character flaw, a fear, a wound that needs to be healed inside the group, with the group's tools, and by the people the group approves of. The self-help industrial complex runs entirely on this framework. You're broken. We can fix it. Resistance to the fix is proof that you need to be fixed more. You're not ready to receive this. You're just ego talking. This discomfort means it's working. Those are not cult phrases. These are phrases from best-selling books, from wellness retreats, from life coaching programs, from Instagram accounts with 7 million followers. Same mechanism, better branding. So now let's discuss word number 3. Word number 3 is mission. And when a group has a mission, it transcends the ordinary. It's not just a company or a community or a movement or a hobby. It is now a mission, which means the work is urgent. It means the stakes are high, and it means that the people inside are not just members. They're soldiers, evangelists, change agents, warriors for something bigger than themselves. And if the work is a mission, the personal cost, well, that's not a bug. That's a feature. Working 80-hour weeks isn't exploitation if it's a mission. Giving money you can't afford isn't a con if it's a mission. Cutting off the people you listen who question your involvement isn't isolation if it's for the mission. Tech startups call it a mission. Political campaigns call it a mission. Brands even call it a mission. And the same thing happens every single time. The mission becomes justification for everything that the mission requires. And that includes things that outside of the mission, you would absolutely never agree to. Let that sit. And so that brings us to word number 4, which is community. This one is the most seductive because it is the most legitimate. Human beings fundamentally need community. This is not a theory. It's documented, biological, and fundamental. Loneliness is a public health crisis. Connection is a survival need for human beings. And the desire to belong is not a weakness to be exploited. It's just one of the features of being a human being, which is exactly why the word community is the most powerful recruitment tool in the arsenal. Cults don't recruit with doctrine, not at first anyway. First, they recruit with warmth, with the overwhelmingly genuine experience of being welcomed, wanted, seen. That doctrine, it comes later. The requirements, they come later. The isolation, that too comes later. But first comes the community. And in a culture where genuine community has become increasingly scarce, where neighbors don't know each other anymore, where workplaces are transactional, where online connection is algorithmically mediated and always slightly hollow, the offer of real community, of true belonging, lands like water in an absolute drought. You're not weak for wanting it, and you're not foolish for being moved by it. You are the predictable product of a culture that manufactured the thirst and then sent someone in to sell you the drink to quench it. Does any of this sound familiar? Because if it does, then I'm going to bring you to word number 5, which is authentic. This one. This word is my absolute personal favorite. Authentic. Every cult, every high control group, every manipulative system ever eventually claims to offer you your authentic self, the real you, underneath the conditioning, the you that exists before the world got to you, which is a breathtaking piece of architecture when you think about it. Because it means the self that arrived at the group's door with doubts, with outside relationships, with an interior life that didn't match the group's template, that self, according to them, is inauthentic. It's the product of bad conditioning. And the self that emerges through the group's process, that is the real you. The NXIVM curriculum was called the Executive Success Program. It was framed as the removal of psychological barriers, the things standing between you and what they call your authentic potential. The branding ceremonies, the slave-master relationships, the caloric restriction, all of it was framed as authenticity work. You were being freed. Now, where else have you heard the promise of the authentic self? Go ahead. I'll wait. Your time's up. In the $4.5 trillion wellness industry, in the personal development space, in the social media economy, where the highest performing content is the quote unquote authentic post, the real moment, the unfiltered truth. All of it is carefully constructed. It's all optimized, and it's deployed for maximum engagement. Authenticity became a brand, and like all brands, that authenticity can be sold. So the most fundamentally scary part about all of this is that the language is already inside you, and it's already inside me. And here's what I want you to really sit with. Every single word I just described, family, growth, mission, community, and the word authentic, well, you've heard all of those in contexts that felt completely normal. They felt positive. They felt like things you wanted to be part of. And you may still want to be part of them. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about the mechanism underneath the words, the specific work that word is doing. And regardless of whether the group using it is a compound or a campus, a leader in a robe or a CEO in a hoodie, that mechanism is the exact same. Words that reframe leaving as betrayal, words that reframe doubt as a personal failure, words that reframe the group's demands as your own demands, and then those words that reframe the outside world, outside of the group or the community or the family, as insufficient, dangerous, and corrupt. These are not accidents. They are design, and they work whether the designer is a documented cult leader or a brand strategist who has never even heard of Robert Lifton and loaded language and would be deeply offended by the comparison. But at the end of the day, the effect is the same. The susceptibility is the same. And the reason the susceptibility is there, the reason loaded language lands, is that pop culture has been practicing on you and me for decades. Every time a brand made you feel like a member of something, every time a show made you feel like an outsider for not watching it, Every time a public figure, a politician, a celebrity, every time that their language crept into your own vocabulary without you noticing it, that's part of it. And every time you used a word and you didn't quite remember where you learned it, the language had gotten in. It always gets in. But the question is whether or not you know it's there. The sad fact of all of this is that language is not neutral. It never was. Every word is a frame. Every frame is an argument about what's real, what matters, who belongs, and what it costs to disagree. The people who understand this, the people who design language deliberately, who test it, refine it, deploy it with precision, those people have an enormous structural advantage over the people who don't. And cult leaders understand this. But so do marketers. And so do political consultants. And so do the engineers who named Instagram's approval metric a like instead of an acknowledgement or a view. Because like implies emotional response. Emotional response drives behavior. And behavior always drives profit. None of this means you can opt out of language, because you can't. It's the medium of thought. The goal is not paranoia, scanning every sentence for manipulation before you'll let it land. That's exhausting, and it's almost completely impossible. The goal is fluency. To know what the words are doing underneath what the words are saying. To hear family, and also hear, you now owe this group something that you can't choose to owe it. To hear the word authentic, you should also hear, the self you came in with has been declared insufficient. And to hear growth, you should also hear, your resistance is the problem, not our methods. You don't have to reject the words. You can still use them, love them, and mean them. You just have to know what they're going to cost you. Because the recruiter already knows. And now, so do you. I'm April Rain. This has been a little tidbit from This Could Be a Cult. You already know the rules.